Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and today I'm not in front of my bookshelf because I thought it would be more fitting today to be beside my Christmas tree and beneath my painting of Charles Dickens, because today I'm going to be talking about Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. So I realised on rereading A Christmas Carol this year that I had never actually done a video on A Christmas Carol before. 2 years ago I did a series of videos on this channel called What the Dickens, where I talked about a different Dickens novel every day for 14 days, from my least favourite up until my favourite. But I only included Dickens's full-length novels because it didn't really seem fair to include his novellas and shorter works. But I do really enjoy Dickens's Christmas stories. A Christmas Carol is one of many Christmas novellas that Dickens wrote, and it is by far my favourite. And I think that I really should talk about Dickens's Christmas works a bit more on this channel because I enjoy them so much. Next year I think I'm going to try and reread all of Charles Dickens's Christmas stories and do a little mini author week going through Dickens's Christmas stories from my least favourite up into my favourite, but I didn't quite manage to get organised to do that in time this year. But I thought, as I have reread A Christmas Carol this year, that I would do a video on it because I love it so much and because I haven't really spoken about it that much on this channel before. So as I did in my actual What the Dickens series, which I did nearly 2 years ago now, I can't believe it's been that long, as I did then, I will talk briefly about what A Christmas Carol is about and about my experience reading it, and then I will go through many of the things I love about it and some of the things I like less about it. Although with A Christmas Carol I feel like there isn't that much that I don't like about it because it is very, very wonderful. I feel like most people probably know what A Christmas Carol is about. It is one of Dickens's most famous works, possibly his most famous work. I think it is the work by Charles Dickens that has most permeated into popular culture, even more I would say than Oliver Twist. It was an immense success when it was first published on the 17th of December 1843, and it sold out of the entire print run in about 2 weeks. And since then it has been consistently popular, and it is one of Britain's best loved stories. It's been adapted to screen and to stage and to many other forms and to a lot of parodies many times. And the story of A Christmas Carol is incredibly well known. We follow a man called Scrooge, who is not a very nice man. He is a miser, he is cruel, he is solitary, he is not very happy, not very cheerful, and he is above all very selfish. Christmas Eve comes and he is visited by 4 ghosts. The first ghost is the ghost of his old business partner Jacob Marley, who warns him that he will be visited that night by 3 spirits. And then those spirits come. We have the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas yet to come. And these 3 spirits show Scrooge scenes from his own life's past and future, and from the past, future and present of those around him, which lead him to think that maybe the life he has been living is not the best life that he could have been living. And the book basically follows Scrooge's moral and emotional transformation over Christmas. So I first read A Christmas Carol when I was 17 years old. Unlike most people who started off with A Christmas Carol and then read all of the rest of Dickens, I read all of the rest of Dickens before I read A Christmas Carol. I had read Dickens's 14 full-length novels before I read A Christmas Carol. I don't know why I didn't pick it up sooner than that. When I did, I really loved it, and since then I've reread it several times and loved it more and more, I would say, each time. One of my favourite sort of readings / experiences of A Christmas Carol is a few years ago, I think probably 3 years ago, me and my boyfriend Nick went to a live performance, a dramatic reading of A Christmas Carol in a place called Speke Hall on the Wirral near Liverpool, which is a old beautiful Tudor house. And the book, A Christmas Carol, was read unabridged by Gerald Dickens, who is an actor and a descendant of Dickens, and he read it brilliantly. He knew it off by heart, and it was absolutely incredible and so wonderful, and he brought the words to life so much, because one of the things I love about A Christmas Carol is the language in it, and I thought that performance was absolutely beautiful and certainly made me love A Christmas Carol even more. I decided to read it again this Christmas, partly because me and Carolyn from Carolyn's Reading Rambles and Kate Howe decided to buddy read together a few different Christmas stories from the Victorian period, and I'll talk about some more of them in my December wrap-up. To begin with, Nick and I got an audiobook of A Christmas Carol to listen to, and then we started listening to this audiobook, which was a performance version where there were actors doing lots of the voices, and I thought it was a voice-acted, direct reading of A Christmas Carol, and then a little way into it started to realise that there were a lot of additions and a lot of changes, and that a lot of it had been adapted and altered. But I listened to that at the beginning of December and was so disappointed that I thought I had to go and read the actual Christmas Carol in print form. And so I picked up A Christmas Carol and read it again, which was really, really lovely. I read like Stay an evening after work this week, which has been a real delight. This is the new Vintage Classics edition of A Christmas Carol. They've just released 6 Dickens books, which is very exciting. They're in the same like style with the French flaps that there were the 6 floral Jane Austens and the very gothic looking Bronte novels, and also some lovely red Russian classics, including War and Peace, which is still sat upstairs on my bedside table looking at me because I read like 200 pages in July and I haven't read anything since. But that is a challenge for next year, and I will return to talking about A Christmas Carol. Vintage Classics very kindly sent me review copies of this edition of A Christmas Carol and also their new edition of Great Expectations. So to talk about the things that I love about A Christmas Carol, because there are a lot of them. Partly, I think, the story is wonderful, and that's one of the reasons why it is so popular and why it remains so popular, is because it has a really good story. It's a fairly simple story on the face of it. Scrooge's character development is quite quick and quite simple in a way. It is from bad to good, from selfish to selfless, but that actually works for what it is. One of the things I love about A Christmas Carol is that it combines that parable-like simplicity of the actual story and of the spirits with many more complicated issues, and the characters in this do feel real. So many of them, Scrooge, but also the Cratchits, his nephew Fred, so many of the characters in this do feel real and do come alive. They are exaggerated like Dickens's characters so often are, but they do feel very much alive in this book, and they don't feel like placeholders for the story, despite the fact that the story is on a surface level quite simplistic. I've spoken before on this channel about why one of the reasons why I love Charles Dickens so much is that I find his books really balanced. They have a really good balance of light and dark, of witty and emotional, of serious and fun. And one of the things I think he does very well in A Christmas Carol is kind of balance that sort of parable simplicity with real characters and a real sense of emotion. And again, this book is, like so many of Dickens's works, incredibly funny but also incredibly moving. The amount of times I cry when reading A Christmas Carol, but also it's incredibly funny, and Dickens's language I think is really at its best. And this is one of the things I love so much about A Christmas Carol, and I partly wonder if I notice it more in A Christmas Carol because it's quite short, and so I tend to read it slightly differently to some of his longer novels. But let me read the first few paragraphs, because just Dickens, our Dickens. Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know, of my own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade, but the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hand shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat, emphatically, that Marley was as dead as a doornail. It's so wonderfully written and with such a sense of fun. I think you can really tell that Dickens enjoyed writing A Christmas Carol. And one of the things about the language in A Christmas Carol that I especially love is that intrusion of this kind of narrative eye that you don't always get in Dickens's books. It's not that uncommon in Victorian literature for an author to kind of intrude their narrative voice on a third-person narration, but Dickens doesn't do it that often, and I don't think he ever does it quite so much as in A Christmas Carol. And there are several other moments throughout the novella in which Dickens kind of comments on the language he's using or comments on the characters around him within his own kind of voice. But if there had been twice as many guests, 4 times, old Fezziwig would have been quite a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. If you should happen, by any unlikely chance, to know a man more blessed in a laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is, I should like to know him too. Introduce me to him and I'll cultivate his acquaintance. One of the things I really love about this use of a particular narrative voice in A Christmas Carol is that it really conjures the sense of like someone sat in a circle with their family telling them a story. It makes it a bit confessional or confidential, like Dickens is talking directly to you. The way he uses that I think is so effective, and it's one of the things about the language of A Christmas Carol that I love. Another thing I love about A Christmas Carol, I think, which I think is one of the reasons why it has stood the test of time so well and why it is so beloved today and remains Dickens's most famous work, is that it has this wonderful balance of being very Victorian but also quite timeless, because this simple plot that Dickens has throughout of Scrooge and the ghost and his kind of moral redemption is a very kind of universal and timeless story. It could take place in any time, in any setting, as it often does in adaptations and parodies of A Christmas Carol. But at the same time, A Christmas Carol is so thoroughly Victorian. And I think partly because a lot of things that people like about Christmas today is to do with traditions, a lot of which were emerging in the Victorian period. In fact, the year that Charles Dickens published A Christmas Carol was the year that the first Christmas cards went on sale. A lot of things we love about Christmas in Britain today come from the Victorian period, and so the fact that A Christmas Carol is so thoroughly Victorian, as well as being a bit timeless, is one of the things I think that makes it so enjoyed still today, and one of the things that I really love about it as someone who loves the Victorian period. With the ghosts of Christmas past and present, we get to see so many different varieties of Christmas experienced in the mid-19th century in such an enjoyable and interesting way, and Dickens conjures up so well with such amazing language and such rich imagery the different Christmases that these people experience. The Christmas dinner of the Cratchits, I think, is such a memorable scene and feels so thoroughly Christmassy and familiar to a lot of people who celebrate Christmas in Britain today, even though this is a book written well over 150 years ago. And I think that's one of the things that means it is so well remembered and so loved. And I think it's really interesting that in A Christmas Carol, Dickens has managed to capture that excellent, perfect balance between the sort of timelessness and embedding it in sort of Victorian culture and Victorian tradition. And that's one of the reasons why I love it. There are many more things I love about A Christmas Carol. I could be here for a very, very long time, but I need to pack because I'm going home for Christmas to my parents' house in a few hours. As I said at the beginning, I don't have many negative things to say about A Christmas Carol. There's not really anything I don't like about it. There are like a couple of paragraphs where Dickens is a little bit creepy and talks about like pretty women who he's sure that everyone would want to kiss, but Dickens does that sometimes, and sometimes you just have to read on. Quickly before I go, I did want to mention one other thing. I'm currently halfway through this book, which is called Dickens and Christmas by Lucinda Hawksley. Lucinda Hawksley is another ancestor / relation of Charles Dickens, and this book is published by Pen and Sword Books. They very kindly sent me this review. I'm about halfway through it now and really enjoying it, and it is a book about Dickens and Christmas. And in fact, literally half an hour ago, I read the chapter about Dickens writing A Christmas Carol and about the popular reception of A Christmas Carol at the time, and it's so interesting to read about just how much everybody loved it in the Victorian period as well, and just how much it captured everyone's imaginations. So as I said, I would highly recommend Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. I think it is one of Dickens's best written works and one of his loveliest, and I can understand why it is so well remembered. It's absolutely beautiful and wonderful. So I feel like that's been quite enough of a very happy rave review, so I will leave you now to get on with your Christmases. There will be another Christmassy video tomorrow, and then I will probably be gone for a week or two over Christmas and New Year doing family stuff and the like, and then I'm back again in the new year, probably to talk about all of my favourite books of the year, which I'm very excited to do. Merry Christmas if you celebrate such things, and go and read A Christmas Carol if you haven't already. There is still time. It's so good, I promise. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.